One of these spices was once so valuable that a king demanded 3,000 pounds of it just to spare a city from destruction. Another one, gram for gram, sometimes costs more than gold. There are thousands of spices grown around the world, but according to the USDA, just 7 of them make up more than 3/4 of everything America actually imports. By value, today 8 spices that actually make that list, where they really come from, and why they've earned a permanent place in the kitchen. Welcome to Food Exposition. Today, 8 spices, what they actually taste like, where they really come from, and why they've stuck around. Let's start with the one that's probably sitting closest to your stove. First, black pepper. Sharp, biting heat that builds across the tongue instead of hitting all at once, with a woody, almost floral undertone if it's freshly cracked instead of pre-ground, and a faint numbing tingle right at the tip of the tongue. It's native to the Malabar coast of southern India, harvested there for thousands of years, and its value in the ancient world was enormous. In the year 410, when the Visigothic king Alaric laid siege to Rome, part of the ransom he demanded to spare the city was 3,000 pounds of pepper. The heat itself comes from a compound called piperine, which also appears to help the body absorb certain other nutrients more efficiently, part of why it's traditionally paired with turmeric in Indian cooking. Today, black pepper is the single most imported spice by value in the United States, ahead of every other spice on this list. Black pepper earns its spot through sheer volume. The next spice earns its spot despite most people never tasting the real version of it. Second, cinnamon. Warm and sweet with a peppery bite underneath, and here's the part almost nobody knows. What you're tasting is probably not what you think it is. Real Ceylon cinnamon, thin and papery, comes from a specific tree native to Sri Lanka, with a flavor that's softer and more delicate than what most people grew up eating. Well over 90% of what's sold as cinnamon across America is actually cassia, a related but different bark grown mainly in China, Indonesia, and Vietnam, thicker, sharper, and more intensely spiced. Cassia became the American default largely because it's cheaper to grow and ship at scale, and for most people who grew up with it, that bolder flavor simply is what cinnamon tastes like, even though true Ceylon cinnamon is technically the original article. Cinnamon's dominance comes down to which plant got here cheapest. The next spice earns its spot for a completely different reason: color. Third, turmeric. Earthy and slightly bitter with a musky, almost peppery undertone and a color so intense it can stain a cutting board orange for days. That color comes from a compound called curcumin, native to South Asia, and it's the backbone of most curry powder blends, giving them their signature golden yellow color before a single other spice is even added. In the U.S., turmeric has seen a genuine popularity surge over the last several years, driven partly by golden milk lattes and a wellness-focused audience. Curry powder sales alone climbed by roughly 18% between 2020 and 2022. Turmeric rode a modern wellness trend to popularity. The next spice has been a kitchen staple for thousands of years, no trend required. Fourth, cumin. Warm and nutty with a slightly smoky, almost bitter edge. The smell that instantly reads as taco seasoning to most American noses. It's been used since ancient Egypt, where it's been found among items placed in the tombs of pharaohs, and it remains foundational across Middle Eastern, Indian, and Mexican cooking today. In America, cumin imports have actually been climbing in recent years, tracking directly alongside the growing popularity of Tex-Mex and South Asian cuisine in the average American kitchen. Cumin's popularity is tied to how Americans eat right now. The next spice's popularity is tied to how Americans bake, during fall especially. Fifth, nutmeg. Warm and sweet with a peppery bite of its own, most familiar in eggnog, pumpkin pie, and a good bechamel sauce. It comes from the seed of a tropical evergreen tree native to Indonesia's Banda Islands, and for centuries, those islands were the only place on Earth where it grew at all. A little goes an extremely long way. Most recipes call for barely a pinch, freshly grated, which is part of why it's remained a pantry staple rather than a bulk ingredient. Its popularity spikes hardest in the winter months across North America when it becomes one of the defining flavors of the holiday season alongside cinnamon and cloves. Bridge nutmeg's origin story and the next spice's origin story are actually the exact same story on the exact same islands. Sixth, cloves. Intensely sweet and hot, almost numbing on the tongue. The same numbing effect dentists once relied on clove oil for, long before modern anesthetics existed. Like nutmeg, cloves originally grew in only one place on Earth, the same small cluster of Indonesian islands once known as the Spice Islands. For centuries, that scarcity made cloves one of the single most valuable trade goods on the planet, valuable enough that entire trading empires were built specifically to control who got access to them. Today, whole cloves get studded into holiday hams and steeped into mulled wine, while ground cloves anchor pumpkin spice and gingerbread blends everywhere. Cloves and nutmeg both trace back to the same tiny corner of the world. The next spice's biggest producer today isn't even where the plant originally came from. Seventh, cardamom. Bright and citrusy with a cooling, almost menthol-like edge, a sharp contrast to every warm, heavy spice so far on this list. It's originally native to the forests of southern India, but Guatemala has since become one of the world's largest producers after the plant was introduced there in the early 1900s. Often called the Queen of Spices, it's a defining flavor in chai, in Scandinavian holiday baking, and in the strong cardamom-spiced coffee served across the Middle East. It also consistently ranks among the most expensive spices in the world by weight because the pods have to be hand-harvested at exactly the right moment of ripeness to develop their full flavor. Cardamom is one of the priciest spices on Earth. The last one on this list is priciest of all by a margin that isn't close. Eighth and last, saffron. The flavor is deceptively faint on its own, honeyed, slightly hay-like, but a single strand turns an entire pot of rice a deep golden color and carries through every bite. It's essential to paella, risotto, and biryani, and it comes from the stigma of a crocus flower that blooms for barely a week each year, producing exactly 3 usable threads per flower, hand-picked before sunrise while they're still fresh enough to survive the process. It takes roughly 75,000 flowers, harvested entirely by hand, to produce a single pound, which sells for anywhere from $5,000 to over $10,000 in the United States, at times more per ounce than the gold itself. If this changes how you look at the spice rack, that's exactly what this channel is for. Hit subscribe if you want more of these, because next time we're going through every type of wine you can actually order, and the story behind the single best performing episode of this entire series. See you in the next one.